Yeah,
This
yeah.
one?
That was Ralph.
Okay.
That's confusing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. How are things, Ralph? You doing?
Oh, good, thanks.
Yeah.
I didn't recognise you. This.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how are you going, Cliff?
Really well, mate. How about good
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah.
Doing well, I can see. Look healthy. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
doing.
okay. Thanks, mate.
I'm doing pretty good.
I've been learning how to outsource my class leading responsibility.
I can see that, Todd.
Yeah, it's working really well.
Yeah, I bet.
I got David Moffat on earlier this year, so this is.
Yeah, what did he do? What did he present on?
It was really captivating.
Yeah.
Was it really memorable? Thanks.
It was a while ago.
What was it?
Yeah. That was. I can go
What
on
was
my YouTube feed. And
Were we
figure it out.
actually here, or was that when you were away? No, wait. What was that? Sorry to David Muffet.
We can find out though.
Oh, I do remember him. Of course, that might have been when he was visiting last week. Then I remember.
Let's see what it was. Because and the thing is, he's done a couple. So there was one I know he did that was it was like a redo of one of his camp topics. He's a great recycler.
Yeah, he's a good presenter, actually, Dave.
So let's see.
I don't remember before.
Well, I can't because I did the one in June.
I'm trying to find it on here. I can. Oh wait, because I'm looking at the wrong.
Huh. Maybe it was longer ago than I realized. Because I don't see one. I don't actually see one this year. Maybe it's the one I'm thinking from last year, which is why I don't remember it.
Gosh.
I think it has something to do with angels.
Something to do with angels. That sounds reasonable.
Good and truth. Good and truth.
yeah, standard.
He did the
Yeah. Well, what I was thinking of was the
Okay.
virtual retreat
Right.
thing. That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay, I feel better now that there wasn't just one. Anyway,
yeah.
shall we?
So we had Dave Lindruth do one last year. Jacob the founding father. That. Yeah. So it happens.
You're the one delaying.
Thinking like an angel. Oh,
Well
Okay.
done.
wins.
May of last year. Well done.
Okay, so he did. So Dave hasn't done one as recently as I thought.
Oh, he must be due. He must be due.
Yeah. Well, that means he can do one again soon.
That's what I'm saying. He must be due. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe just let him have his leave and then get in touch.
Yeah. We'll do that. All right. Well, it is 11:05 by my clock, and Murray is here.
Hi, Mary.
So
Hi there.
Hi,
I
Murray.
was thinking about. Wait. How about Patricia?
She was just texting with me about the Yothu donations. She's got her phone.
Well, she might be doing it online then.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes she does.
Yeah. That's my guess.
That's the thing with the YouTube is you can't tell who's there or not.
Do you want me to
but-
check?
Nah, it's 11:06. We've
Yeah.
given them a few minutes to be late. I say we proceed.
We have given them a few minutes to trust that they are there.
Yeah. So the floor is yours. and-
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to switch to slides. So
Yep.
are you just going to spotlight me or something like that?
Sure. Let's see.
Spotlight.
Boom. You are spotlighted.
Excellent. So let's see if I can shift this.
Oh.
Okay. So you can see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
We got it here.
Great. Great. Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Well, thanks for the invite, Todd. A topic that I have covered off before and through various other fairy tales, but for those listening, Todd approached me had a question around Snow White, and this is one fairy tale that I hadn't looked at. So it was an opportunity to just have a bit of a deeper look into it and draw out some of the elements in it that align with some of the spiritual principles that I'm sure you'll all be familiar with. So just to get that up there, because it's going on to YouTube, so we just get our fair use disclaimer and hopefully won't hear anything else about it. So look, just coming to the concept of the fairy tale and the idea that the stories are archetypal in form. This is something that was really gone into in some depth through the Jungian analyst and scholar Marie-Louise von Franz. So she did a lot of work on this. In fact, her thesis was on the fairy tale, and that kind of reinvigorated an interest at a scholarly level so far as fairy tales go, and their application in terms of psychological development. But regardless of that, whatever story we're looking at, all stories in general terms can be considered as containers for meaning. And they're not just things that are dreamed up, although certainly a lot of stories are dreamed up, but the idea there is that they are products of the human mind. And so any story, whether it's a fairy tale, a movie, whatever, wherever and in whatever medium you find the story, it is a product that has been filtered through a human mind. And so it's going to have elements that, of course, are reflective of the structure and processes of the mind. And so when this fairy tale that we're going to be dealing with today, Snow White, was originally put together, of course, it didn't have the meaning that we're going to be looking at today. But it doesn't mean that it isn't a container for meaning. So stories get reworked through time in ways in which reflect the states of those who are using the story as that container for meaning, or are looking into the story so far as meaning goes. And of course, we're very familiar with this idea so far as the word is concerned, that the internal sense of the word expounds things that have to do with the internal aspect of a human being, and that is a focus on their thoughts and intentions. So fairy tales, I suggest, are no different, that they met a need back in the day, and because they met that need, and have archetypal kind of universal elements in them, they're able to be adapted to whatever generation is reading them. So we have most fairy tales, although Snow White doesn't actually start in this way, but many do, as you have this idea of once upon a time in a land far away. So that's universal in its context. So once upon a time is all time and every time. And in a land far away is a land that is much closer to us than we might imagine, because it's the psychological world of our of our mind. So that's where we're going to be taking the focus today. And the appeal of the fairy tale is due to the fact that it has these universal themes running through them that speak to the human condition. So when you think about a fairy tale, they're usually quite short, and they follow a particular structure. There seems to be a particular structure that they follow, and they always involve transition, a movement from one state culminating in a happy ever after state in the end, after going through trials and tribulations through the middle period. So that's the basic structure of the fairy tale. This fairy tale has been worked a few times. Obviously, it was published by Grimm, but it existed as an oral telling well before them. So, and some scholars trace the elements of this particular fairy tale back to ancient Greece. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So whether that's a long bow or not, I don't know. But of course, with universal themes, you do see them, throughout many different cultures and stories. So other fairy tales can be, elements of them can be found universally through most cultures, and going back into antiquity as an oral telling. And many elements of fairy tales that we are probably familiar with today have elements that are found in Chinese stories, and so they definitely have this universal aspect. Okay, so I'm assuming everyone is familiar with the story, but just in case you're not, so I'm just going to hopefully play a trailer here, and this will give us a little bit of a summary. And are you going to be able to hear this, I wonder? So can you hear the sound there?
No, but
Well,
yeah, no.
Okay, hang on a second. I'll just get back to my Zoom.
If you're doing a share screen on your side, there's a button you have to push on the share screen selection to share audio as well.
Okay. So you may need to spotlight that screen, Todd, just to.
Looks like it's got the audio note there, so it should come through.
Okay, we'll give it a go.
We'll find out.
I just.
It looks like you need to hit play.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a silent movie.
Oh, now we're going somewhere.
Hers was a queen, her beauty extolled, but hers was a heart bitter, empty, and cold. True beauty lies in the eyes, where love light gleams and never dies. I'm wishing for the one I love to find me today. I'm hoping and I'm dreaming of the nice things he'll say.
You have a beautiful smile. But it's not just your smile. You have a dance in your step and a song in your voice.
Famed is thy beauty, majesty, but a lovelier name I see.
Take Snow White far into the forest, and then, my faithful huntsman, you shall kill her.
Women in fruit, I tell you.
It's a bit crazy, wasn't
Yeah,
it? Seven Dwarfs.
right. Yeah.
Okay, so we're back to the slides, yeah?
Yep.
Yep, great, thanks. Yeah, so that gives a basic outline of the story. And one of the things that is striking, I don't know if you know, but there's a recent release. Disney has just redone it, so this will be the third time it's done, and they have messed with the story.
Yes.
Oh, surprise.
And it looks like it's going to tank. So, and
Yeah.
that's the thing.
Snow woke and the 7-day thems.
Yeah, well, it's a worry, right? But what it shows is that the archetypal elements in these kind of stories are, they appeal to something deep in the psyche. And when you start to mess with them, they don't have the same impact because they don't elicit the same affections, and they don't give access to the power of the story in terms of being able to take us through what we need to go through psychologically in order to find fulfillment over the course of life. So the key to most fairy tales is the happy ever after ending, and it's the union of what is masculine and feminine, or the will and the understanding, as we would understand it, right? So this is the appeal they have to something deeply spiritual within us. And when we come from a more external focus so far as values and mess with the values of the story and all of that to try and make it appeal to a modern audience, it just doesn't appear to work. And the interesting thing about it is that the original movie, which was Disney's first full-length animated feature, is adjusted to today's terms, is still the greatest grossing animated movie of all time. So
Really?
so there's something really quite dynamic about the way that they portrayed the story. And Disney did alter it a little bit, but not much. Some of the fairy tales that Disney have done they've done major alterations, but in that original animated version, it's pretty close to the original. Okay, so we have the story arc, which you've just seen in that trailer, but I've just sort of mapped it out a little bit here. And of course, every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And because these stories are really about transition, you have the opening, which sets the scene, and then you have the middle period, which can be thought of as the issues and challenges that and what needs to be overcome, and it moves through to the resolution at the end. So the characters is really what we're going to be focusing on in the main. But before doing that, I just want to give a bit of a summary, which has more of a spiritual focus, just so that it gives us a bit of a frame for what's coming. And hopefully, just if this resonates with you a bit, then perhaps other things from our movement through the characters will also resonate, and you'll have time to be able to comment on that, or even ask questions at the end. So what we have, the story is centered obviously around Snow White, and the main protagonist is the evil queen. So what you notice about the evil queen in the story is that she is a stepmother, and so not the true mother, to which Snow White's father, who you hear virtually nothing about, has become wedded to. Now, from a representation or representative point of view, a mother represents a form of the church or a form of an understanding of doctrine. that serves a spiritual process. And a stepmother, which is common in fairy tales, is a negative or a resistant force. And this can be likened to our historical faith, or faith that we have just taken on authority but haven't really worked through for ourselves, so that it has become a living faith for us. And so the problem with the historical faith is that it's not a genuine faith, and it serves to hold in place the very thing that spiritual life seeks to free us from. So a historical faith basically holds what is of the proprium in power. And it's where the spiritual is serving the natural. And so in the story, you have this constant movement of the queen to consulting a mirror, this magic mirror. And the magic mirror is able to tell her exactly how the situation is. And while it's telling her what she wants to hear, all's well and good. But as soon as the mirror starts revealing things that she doesn't want to hear, then this excites resistance and a desire to kill and destroy those things which seem to go against the queen's self-interest. So we can think of the mirror as the word. And while the word tells us what we want to hear, it's all well and good. But once it starts pointing out things in us that we need to face, then it can be quite difficult to deal with what's being revealed, and it excites resistant forces. Okay, so self-love becomes apparent, and there's a movement to try and suppress what is making us uncomfortable. So while that process is occurring, the other process is the development of what's represented by Snow White. And Snow White can be seen to be representative of a genuine affection for truth. And that genuine affection for truth is beginning to develop, and it's reaching a certain point where this sets up these conditions for conflict. So the old has to pass in order for the new to come into being. And this transition or transformation always involves ideas of death and resurrection. And so you see these elements within the story. You know, Snow White's, the temptation period is a period of difficulty where the queen, not only in that initial casting her out of her home of origin into the forest where the huntsman is charged with killing her, and we'll come to that in a sec. But also she goes through this attempt to murder Snow White through various means, and we'll also have a look at that in a little bit. So you have this idea of the natural loves being resistant to spiritual loves. And that theme is throughout the writings, right? So, and so this occurs when there's an awakening to the reality of the situation. And so truth is sort of breaking into conscious awareness. And of course, the natural man doesn't like the implication and seeks to destroy what is advancing so far as that spiritual quality is concerned. So the opening of the story. So the opening of the story is centered around, it's the middle of winter, okay? So, and the true queen, if you like, is doing some embroidery, and she pricks her finger, and a few drops of blood fall onto the snow. And so there's this idea of the color red. She's working on an ebony frame. So the black and the snow is white. So you have these three colors that are identified, and her desire is to have a child that has lips as red as blood, her skin is as white as snow, and her hair is as dark as or black as ebony. So you have these three elements. And the elements of 3 and 7 occur throughout the story. They're everywhere throughout the story. Obviously, the 7 dwarves, there's 7 mountains. The queen, the evil queen, actually consults the mirror 7 times. So the number 7 is right through this, as is the number 3. And so you have these 3 colors. You've got black, white, and red. And so when you look at these colors so far as correspondence is concerned, what you have there is black is what is natural, white is what is spiritual, and red is what is celestial. And of course, Snow White is the personification of innocence. And at the start of the story, she is the innocence of ignorance. Okay, she's naive. She's a child. So she's, but the story in terms of transition is about Snow White going from being a child into becoming a woman. And that transition is illustrated also through the house of origin. This is another 3. You have the house of origin, you have the transitional place of abode, which is the dwarf's cottage, and then you have the resolution at the end, which is the palace where she is married to the prince. So Snow White is described in terms of her beauty, and so it's an exceptional beauty, and it plays a significant role in the plot because of obviously the stepmother's desire to be the fairest of them all, and so this is a challenge to that. So the stepmother and her obsession with herself and looking into this mirror represents the external form of beauty, whereas Snow White represents the internal aspect of beauty that is grounded in innocence. She's also portrayed as kind, gentle, compassionate, kind-hearted. As I mentioned, there's her innocence, which is a defining trait, and emphasizing her purity and lack of malice. So one in whom there is no guile, right? So she also has the quality of resilience. She faces many, many dangers and is able to remain resilient and resourceful through it all. And so you have this idea of being able to adapt as well. And her compassion is seen in her interactions with the 7 dwarfs, and what's drawn out in the Disney story is also her affinity and relationship to forest creatures as well. So she's well liked, and everything that embodies what we would term a genuine affection for truth, which is an expression of charity itself. So then we have the stepmother, the false mother, if you like, and she is everything Snow White isn't. She has an external beauty, but internally is just totally evil. So what she represents is the self-love, which is all-consuming. And that's seen in that when she casts Snow White out and asks the huntsman to kill her, she doesn't only ask the huntsman to kill her. I mean, in the Disney version, the huntsman is to bring her Snow White's heart, but in the Grimm version, no pun intended, she is asked to bring the young Snow White's lungs and liver so that she can cook them and eat them. So yeah, so she's a piece of work, right? So And of course, Disney has softened the story in that sense. But the interesting thing about it is that when you think of this character as what is of the proprium, so the evil and falsity of the proprium, seeking to destroy innocence. And you can see, like, so the organs represent what is internal, and what you have in the liver is that which purifies the blood. So what is of the affections being destroyed, the capacity to purify the blood, if you like, which can link to a movement away from valuing things, valuing self-examination, that aspect of spiritual life. And also the lungs have to do with the understanding of truth. So there is a desire to destroy that as well. So what you have is this intense character of the stepmother who is filled with jealousy and envy. There's vanity as her, as another defining trait. And this drives her to all the actions that she is willing to perform within the story itself. So we see this aspect of her. She's cunning and manipulative, and is able to disguise herself continually. And this is a trait of proprial life, I guess, is the ability to cast whatever's needed in externals to achieve evil ends. And of course, you have this idea of vanity that's associated with this queen. So it's a preoccupation with her own beauty, and that leads her to go to great lengths to seek to eliminate Snow White. And the other aspect here also is that she is ruthless. She's willing to commit terrible acts, murder probably being the worst of them, just to maintain her own status. So we see this obsessive sort of aspect to this character, and it leads to her ultimate downfall eventually. So we have a lot of elements in the story, but one of the key elements is masculine-feminine relations. I think this is something that we can draw out and really get a sense of, so far as it's illustrating the development of the will and the understanding aspects. So also the need for reflection, and what reflection brings about. So part of the story here is that, reflection, self-examination with a view to repentance always draws out things that we don't really want to see. So the first relationship that we have is between this queen that we see between the masculine and feminine, is the queen and the huntsman. So the queen represents what is of the will in this particular case, and the huntsman in this case represents the understanding that is associated with that evil that the queen personifies. So the huntsman is that which does her bidding. So evil needs falsity in order to enact what it seeks, and the huntsman sort of captures this idea. And what we find with the huntsman, although he doesn't carry out the queen's command to kill Snow White, he releases her into the forest, thinking that that some animal would finish her off. So that's what's in the grim version of the story. But what we see with the huntsman is that he's opportunistic. So he has these traits. So he represents the rational faculty that serves self-love. And he seizes the opportunity to benefit himself when he is ordered to kill Snow White. And so his initial dilemma is less about morality and more about personal gain. We have the trait of self-preservation with him. So it's self-preservation that drives him rather than compassion. That's his primary motivator, because he realizes that carrying out the Queen's orders could lead to severe consequences for himself. So he chooses to let Snow White go in order to protect his own interests. He's also calculating. So the willingness to spare Snow White can be seen as a calculated move on his part, as I've just said. So he assesses the situation, the risks and the rewards, and he makes his choice. So these elements are also elements that can be understood as being within ourselves. So while we may desire to do something that's unsavory, if you like, and whatever form that takes, there is this rationalizing process that very quickly is able to assess what it is that can be got away with or not. And that's what this huntsman represents in the story. So
David?
Yep.
Yes. What's his rationale? Why does he not kill Snow White?
So he is thinking, because the father is still in the background, right?
Okay.
So there are consequences that, that the Queen's intense hatred for Snow White and desire to get rid of her could come back on him if he carries out the deed
With the king.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Right.
right. So but the king, the father, sits in the background throughout the story, just as a unspoken force, I guess. Yeah.
Thanks.
So you have him cast out, and the idea. So what happens here is that you've now moved from the original place of abode, the place of origin, and we're in the forest. Now, the forest traditionally represents something that is foreboding, represents the unknown. In Jungian terms, it's often spoken of as being the unconscious, the place where the shadow exists, I guess. So in a more interesting sense is that we do have forests in a number of memorable relations in conjugal love in particular, where the forests have to be navigated through in order to reach communities of a celestial and then of a spiritual and then of a celestial nature. So, but the forest is a place of temptation and struggle, and within that, Snow White comes upon the cottage in the middle of the forest, and so she finds a place to abode within the forest, which is in which we have these seven dwarves. Now, these dwarves would seem to be the transitional aspect of our rational development prior to the arrival of the prince, who is the fulfillment of a rational that is grounded in what is good and true. So the thing with the dwarves is that yes, they're protective of Snow White, and they provide her with shelter and support, but it's a contract. They want what they can get from Snow White, and they then will offer her the protection she needs. But there is an aspect of loyalty and an aspect of genuine sort of protective concern for Snow White. And so if you think about this as a developing rational, one that is focused on truth. Now, what did these dwarves do? The dwarves are miners. They mine precious stones and ore, and they mine it from mountains. So mountains represent love, the loves, and the ore and the precious stones and what have you that you extract from them represent truths. And so this is an interest in truths and the gathering of what is true. And so they are half-statured, so they're not, and in that sense, not fully developed in the context of the story as a male aspect or a masculine aspect to Snow White, Snow White's feminine aspect. So, so what you find with the dwarves is that, yes, they can warn Snow White, they end up protecting her as best they can, but they can't fully protect her. So she still becomes subject to the Queen's advances so far as wanting to get rid of her. But they do provide, a regular kind of stability so far as their activities and things go. I mean, they, it's hi ho, off to work we go kind of stuff, and there you have it, right? They just go about their work. They're regular with what they do, and they provide a stable environment, but are constantly engaged in cautioning Snow White not to open the door to anybody, etc. Yeah, you know the story. Anyway, so we're in the forest, and this is the place of temptation. And what we have here is that another 3 element comes in here with the Queen's attempts to kill Snow White after she's discovered through consulting the mirror that Snow White still lives. And there are 3 elements that are used. The first is a bodice. So she comes to Snow White disguised, offers her a bodice. Snow White, in her innocence of ignorance, if you like, is taken with what the wicked Queen offers, and so is still going through, if you like, a learning process. Now, one of the interesting things about it was that the Queen attempts, first of all, to suffocate her using a bodice. So it's about restricting the ability to breathe or to take in what is true, because that's what, again, you have this idea of the lungs being involved. Then the next thing is a comb, a poison comb, and that's placed in Snow White's hair. So that is an attack on natural truths. And in each case, it's the dwarves that are able to rescue her. But in the third situation, the third temptation is the apple, the poisoned apple. And she takes the apple, and again, you have what obstructs the airway, and she falls into the sleep of death, if you like. And that's where we find her next. So Snow White is in this casket, and what's interesting, we've just in the Logan Praxis groups, we've just come to the end of Genesis with the Arcana story, and it's about Joseph being put into a sepulcher, or into an ark, actually. So into a sarcophagus, I guess it would have been. But again, this idea is found here as well. This one is transparent or made of glass. But the thing is that Snow White doesn't decay, right? The innocence remains pure, and by all intents and purposes seems to be dead, but is asleep within this glass casket. And so this idea is interesting if we think about the nature of the word itself. So the literal sense is relation to the internal sense of the word seems to be something that could be drawn out here. And so the innocence within the word, or what is of an interior nature, is able to be seen by those who are true of heart, if you like. So what you have there is the dwarves who place Snow White within this casket, and are able to view her on on a daily basis. And so there is a sense of while things may not be as they need to be or as we desire them to be. Things are preserved by the Lord deep within our life, and they can be also likened to remains, to be awakened when the time is right. And of course, the time is right when the masculine faculty has developed to the point where it becomes Prince Charming, right? So Prince Charming arrives on the scene, and he represents the regenerate spiritual or rational faculty. And this is about the uniting now of good with truth, which is the heavenly marriage, the will and the understanding, all based around these these deeply desirable characteristics and values that are embodied both in the prince and in Snow White herself. So we have that marriage that takes place. They end up, the prince kisses Snow White, so it's the idea of redeeming love, right? Is able to awaken the deep affections that are found within the human psyche, and they are able to then come together and find expression in a new home. So each of the places of abode represents different states of being. And so here we have the fulfillment of the transition, which is always a movement towards the masculine being wedded with the feminine, or the understanding being wedded with the will, and the will with the understanding. So just by way, we've done relationships. So just double check here. So yeah, we covered those. Yeah, so this is the number 3 and the number 7 that I'd mentioned. So we had the red, white, and black, the bodice, the comb, the apple, the palace, the forest, the final palace. And then you have, in terms of masculine form, you have the huntsman, the dwarves, and the prince. You have 7 mountains, 7 dwarves, 7 groups of things for each of the dwarves. And then you have the mirror, which is consulted 7 times. So we see that just in that quick overview, what you see here is that there are a lot of elements to this fairy tale that are packed in, because a fairy tale isn't very long, but then you have all these different aspects that are packed in terms of principles and values that certainly can be extracted, if you like, and supports our ideas, or the ideas that are provided for us through the heavenly doctrines with regard to the process of development that we're all called to. Yeah, so that's it basically. That's Snow White in a psycho-spiritual form.
Yeah, that was quite interesting. That was quite good.
So I'm happy to take any questions or just receive any comments that you might have.
Yeah, it was incredible, mate. I was looking at a site on the net about the origins of fairy tales, and some of them are quite gruesome.
Yeah,
very, very gruesome. Pinocchio, the original, very gruesome. They burnt his feet. Stuff like that. It wasn't.
Yeah, well, actually, in this story, what I failed to say in the resolution, of course, there's the marriage, but also the queen, the wicked queen, ends up at the marriage, and what happens to her is that she is made to wear iron shoes that are heated, and she danced till she dies.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So if you think about that, you have this idea there of lower things of a hellish nature, so the fire of self-love, where we think we're in control, in actual fact, it controls us. You have this idea, and her having to dance with these shoes on until, frantically, I don't know how much of a dance it was, but a dance of death, effectively, for so far as the wicked queen is concerned.
Look, I appreciated some of the insights you had because like one that jumped out at me was the 7 times in the mirror. I hadn't picked up that, and that the how it relates to the word in the sense of, well, everything's fine when the word tells you what you want to hear, and then all of a sudden it tells you what you don't want to hear. It's kind of
Right.
And that one jumped out, and also what you mentioned about the Snow White in the casket, but not decaying. You know, it's like I'd never thought of that. You know, it's the practicality of, oh well, normally the body decays when it's in that kind of condition. But yeah, it's like remains for us, where it sits there in the background until the time is right for it to come alive.
Yeah, and also just triggered a thought with regard to the use of the fruit, the apple. I mean, it's an appeal back to Genesis, right? So you see that the number 7, what is holy? It highlights the idea, I think, that the process that's being described here is there's a sacredness and holiness to it. So it has that element to it. And the number 3, which we see repeatedly, speaks of what is complete, what has moved through to a completed state. So you have that idea of the 3 attempts to kill her in the forest, and of course in the scriptures we have the 3 temptations that the Lord himself had to experience. So number 3 and 7 is, and it's not just in this fairy tale, it's found in a number of them.
Yeah, right. Huh. Interesting. I mean, I enjoyed this. This was
that was
a
quite
nice way to look at the story that I haven't seen it this way before. And no, thanks for your effort on that.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's good.
So out of curiosity, is there a third feminine? And we've got the evil and we've got the good. Is there something else?
I looked.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. The ordinary feminine.
Yeah. Well, I thought about the animals in the forest. Do they have any connection to in that role, or I don't know?
Yeah, look, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
At a push, it would be possible. They nurture and sustain her in many ways, I guess. So yeah.
Well, and the other aspect of this story that I'd completely forgotten about was the huntsman. I remember that the queen wanted her dead, and
then she wasn't.
And I thought it went from that to, okay, poison apple, off we go. I'd forgotten about that intermediate
Living in the cottage.
No, not the cottage, but I don't remember that the huntsman was out to kill her. I thought it was just my memory. Just okay, how do we get rid of her? Oh, well, we'll just poison her. So that was a good refresher on that aspect of it, because that does make a lot of sense. I like the huntsman as that rational part that is, like as you said, opportunistic. It's self-serving, really, but it's also in service to the queen. It's like, oh, that really adds a dynamic to it that I had completely missed.
Yeah, what staggers me about these stories is their simplicity. And the reason these stories appeal and survive over eons of time is because they obviously speak to something deep within human beings, right? So it was quite interesting just watching, because in today's sort of ideological setting, and that trailer was a fan trailer. It wasn't actually an official trailer. But it's interesting what that person chose to emphasize, which, it seems, I guess, by modern sophisticated standards, a little bit corny. You have that aspect to it. But one of the interesting things was, as I was watching, I don't know if you saw Insight last night, but it was on marriages, marrying young. And so the whole, beyond iView, but the thing was about couples, and a number of them in the audience, had married quite young. And so the discussion was around, is that beneficial or not, or whatever. And two of the young women there, so be in their 20s, specifically referenced Disney as a major influence on their desire, so far as their what they wanted, so out of life, so far as marriage is concerned. I just thought, it was just an interesting, given our current climate, where anything like that is really, you're putting yourself out there when you make statements like that. But that they were prepared to do that, and there was a real quality of innocence in both of them, in what they had to express. So.
Cool.
That's good.
Yeah, well, I'm glad somebody's speaking out.
Yeah. Well, I think it's there's been a lot of backlash to the latest movie, and it's been pretty fierce. People's resistance to the changes that have been made in that story, which is more about self-determination and self-actualization and no need for a man, So, it's quite interesting.
And we don't need one of those.
No.
It's been happening a lot lately. Look at the ads on TV.
Well,
All right.
thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
It's all right. Good seeing you again, and take care.
Yeah.
All right.
Cheers.
See ya.
you.